views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Coming up on this edition of Perspectives, we go front and center with the issue of racism, racial justice in sports. The three have always intertwined throughout history. Coming up on this edition of Perspectives, we discuss the role that athletes play and also what can they do in this fight for social justice and racial justice as well as equality. That's coming up on this edition of Perspectives with yours truly, Daren Jaime.
What's on your mind? Express what's on your mind. What's on your mind?
Anything relevant to life, you bring it to the table. Whether you make a move solo or a movement with a stable. No fables, you speak on your decisions. Cause in the long run, it's your voice, your views, your vision. Keeping it real with many messages for you to know. This ain't radio, but DJ runs the show. Entertainment, he rocks it. Politics, he locks it. The host with the most would handle any topic. Don't forget to share your perspective with shines of light. Cause it might make a difference in someone else's life.
Make a difference in someone's life. Express what's in your heart and your mind. Share your perspective.
What's your perspective? Let them know.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime. Of course, we thank you for joining us every week. You can watch Perspectives here on BronxNet's Channel 67. If you have Verizon Files, it should be Channel 2133 or anytime on the web at bronxnet.org. We thank all of our viewers for joining us, and we want you to know that you can also stay connected to us via our social media pages at BronxNet TV. And then you can also share your perspective. You never know, it just might end up right here on the show. But coming up on this edition of Perspectives, we go front and center with the issue of racism. We go with the issue of athletes, and we talk about sports. Well, we've got a very special edition of Perspectives, and joining us right now is Neisha Butler and DeShaun Tate. Neisha is a former basketball player, an actress, and a tech entrepreneur. She's a former sideline reporter for the Atlanta Hawks and president and founder of Ballin Technology, a not-for-profit that connects sports and technology for student athletes. DeShaun Tate is also a basketball analyst. He's also a reporter and podcast host of Tate's Take. He's been a lead NCAA college basketball and Atlanta Hawks reporter. He's also been a radio correspondent analyst for 92.9, the Game Sports Radio in Atlanta. And we thank you both for joining us here on Perspectives. Glad to have you guys sharing with us in this conversation. What's up, y'all?
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Neisha, I'll go to you first. I'll talk to you first about where we are today in terms of, racism in sports. Obviously, we know that the NBA garnered a lot of attention, and particularly when in the issue of the bubble, when it kind of like shut down all of professional sports. I don't think we ever saw a movement like that ever, going back even in the 60s. I never saw anything like this in the history of sports.
I think when you, have a league that's full of Black men and you have a society that targets and shoots Black men down, it was just inevitable. So I think when you have athletes, and there definitely is a difference from, living in a bubble and being an NBA player. But I mean, just like when Doc Rivers had his press conference, you can tell from his face and his response that, these young men that are, even though they're NBA players, they empathize and they feel, a Black man getting shot 7 times in the back, or a Black man screaming for his mama as he has, a white man's knee on his neck. So, I mean, we haven't seen this before, but then again, I don't think, with the advent of technology, that this brutality has been so blatant and so out and up, in our faces like this. So I do believe that this is not the first time. Clearly, the 60s and the civil rights movement has started, but this is the first time where the whole world, within seconds can see something with social media being so prolific, just a tool that we use every day. So I think the NBA players, and we have to give credit to the WNBA players, because they were the first that really united behind this brutality and definitely brought attention to it. But the NBA, they really had to stand up and do something. So.
Right. And they had to do something. DeShaun, let me bring you here. When we talk about the NBA having to do something, of course, this is now being driven by athletes now. Athletes are the controlling force and being the determining factor. Whereas in the history of sports, pretty much the owners determine what's going down. But in this case, in turning things around, talk to me about the athletes and the role that they're playing.
Yeah, I think the athletes have done a good job by kind of using their platforms in a really positive way and not taking no for an answer, not just sitting back and just saying, you know, we're going to go and play basketball now, regardless of what happens after this. I mean, there was a time when the season resumed, you know, and then another black man got killed. And then the whole season, you know, was shut down pretty much for, you know, a few days. And so a lot of people had some concerns about, you know, exactly what it is that is, you know, solving. But it's not even about what it's solving. It's just about being out there and taking a stance and saying that we're not. Now, one of the concerning parts for me in terms of that whole thing of it is that, you know, you have these officers specifically pointed out and targeted as being Caucasian officers and people that are racist, and sitting back and saying, you know, we're not going to stop because basketball. That's the concerning part for me. We're not going to stop because the season is going to be canceled. We don't care that much about basketball. We don't care that much about sports. And so I think that, you know, as far as guys like, you know, Chris Paul, LeBron James, a few others sprinkled in here and there, and kind of pulling some of the younger guys to make them feel like within the NBA that they have a voice as well, even if they are just first year or second year players. Granted, I don't feel like every athlete should feel obligated as much as I do the fact that I feel everyone should feel obligated.
Yeah. Neisha, talk to me about this, because there was some controversy with, you know, whether or not we actually play games and go forward, or do we actually cancel the season? LeBron James having a conversation with President Barack Obama, really saying, listen, the importance of you guys being there is really what's making the difference. Being in the bubble, you're able to control things. From your perspective, talk to me about the power of the bubble and what that really brought out.
Well, first of all, I think that a lot of people, especially white people in power, were very threatened by Black millionaires using their voice, popular millionaires, because they know that they have the potential power to sway a nation, right? I mean, just the simple fact that there's a game show host as our president of the United States shows you the influence that television and entertainment has, right? So we have to understand that as a people and as athletes, to understand that their influence yields tremendous power in this country, and especially in just the world that we is now. And also the number one thing is how to use that influence to affect economics, right? So there is no freedom without financial freedom, right? So most people in power, they are very, they want order. And the reason why they need order is so they can continue to make money. When anybody actually challenges or threatens that order, then you will see everybody getting involved to stop this, you know, this killing and this hunting down of Black men. I mean, the simple fact of the matter is that police brutality does not have to happen. Right, like killing, and for far too long, in my opinion, for far too long, we have been desensitized, and we actually feel that it's normal. The simple fact that we can sit here today and talk about it as if this is like as American as apple pie is absolutely ridiculous. You know, it's just the simple fact that there are cops out there that can continually kill people, and there's no retribution. Right, like I mean, the fact is that basically a cop goes out and kills somebody unjustly, and the city, the taxpayers, pays for that issue. There's no kind of remorse. There's no kind of responsibility, and it keeps on happening. So I think that this is just a time in our country, you know, that there's just it's just come to a point that it's bursting, and people like LeBron James, which my hat's off to him, that he's doing them, and it's not his job. I also believe that it is his right. But it's not his job to do that. And it's it's commendable that he's doing that, because he's risking a lot. But I think that this part that is not as like a civil war, but if this keeps on happening, what do you expect people to do when they're continually hunted down on the street? Black gun ownership, especially in the South, has quadrupled in the last 2 months. What do you think is going to happen? So this, to me, the fact that LeBron James is having an issue and Chris Paul and their people doing things, I think people should listen to them, because the second part of this story, if they don't listen to these civilized, sophisticated multimillionaires who are trying to talk to them by affecting their pockets, then it would be televised in the streets. So that's the next recourse. So.
Yeah. DeShaun, I mean, give me this here. I mean, we've never seen before. You look on a basketball court, and now what's on the hardwood is Black Lives Matter. I mean, the fact that you have to put that on the court is a statement all by itself. And when we're talking about what we're dealing with, we're not just talking about just police brutality. We're talking about mass incarceration. We're talking about inequality. We're talking about these things. And even more in the sport itself. Let's talk basketball. I'll give you a second to respond, and then we'll come back and talk about this in a minute, because I want to talk about the fact of how we don't have too many African-American head coaches. You got assistant coaches in the ranks, but they don't get their head coaching job. And then you turn around, let's not even talk about ownership. But so when we talk about Black Lives Matter, it matters a lot, not just from a criminal justice perspective, but right there on the court itself.
Yeah, most definitely. First, let me say this just real quick, 2 seconds, and just kind of piggybacking off of what Neisha was saying. You know, I came on someone's show not too long ago, and a lot of this all kind of first started. And they said, you know, what about this surprises you the most? If you had to just pick one thing, what would it be? And I said, you know what? My response is that my response is that I don't think that there's anything about this that surprises me at all. But if I was forced to give an answer and say one thing, it's the fact that it surprises so many other people that it's happening, that it's been happening. People have been blinded from it. I'm not sure if nearly as many people have been blinded from it as they're saying that it is, but yet still giving the full benefit of the doubt. Now, as far as Black Lives Matter put all across, you know, the 94 feet hardwood, and even in addition to that, being put on the jerseys, say her name, I think that it was just an outstanding idea to put this in the forefront of so many different people's faces, and facing them to at least be able to see this, putting Breonna Taylor and guys wearing hats, putting it on custom made masks, putting it on their tennis shoes and so forth. I think that it's a great idea. I just hope that it's actually something that is having an effect on those who really just are trying not to pay attention to it. It's one thing, I've always said this, it's one thing to not understand. It's a whole nother thing to not want to understand. And right, regardless of whether you put it on the floor, whether you put it on the jersey, on the field, or anywhere else, unfortunately, there's just going to be some people that are just not going to be in favor of it.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break. Coming back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the role of athletes. How powerful are they in actually affecting social and racial change and achieving racial justice? That's coming up next on Perspective. Stay with us. We'll come right back in a few. All right, back here on Perspectives, Daren Jaime here with you. We're continuing our conversation, talking about racism, talking about injustice, and talking about how athletes are really using their voice to really come full circle, particularly in the world of basketball. And when we talk about the NBA, you also have to talk about the WNBA, who's also been the women have been at the forefront of this movement, talking about civil rights and talking about racial injustice. Recently, controversy surrounded WNBA Atlanta Dream co-owner Kelly Loeffler, who is also a state senator. And she also says this, quote, that honoring Black Lives Matter, quote, sends a particular political agenda, undermining the potential of the sport, and also sends a message of inclusion. Now, this set off a firestorm amongst WNBA players who actually took in response and calling for her ouster as an owner. And I'll get the response of both of our guests here today. I'll start with you, DeShaun. When you hear something like that coming out of the WNBA, first of all, your thoughts?
I don't just understand the frustration from some of the players, especially and specifically those that are representing the Atlanta Dream and so forth, and wearing those jerseys proud and putting their lives on the line the same way every single time that they go out there and hit the floor passionately. But even more so, I overstand it as if, and I'm trying to get a feel as to what exactly is changing about this game by having this Black Lives Matter movement within the WNBA itself that involve exclusion or anything like that. That part I'm not certain of, but it sounds very selfish. One thing that I think that we should be happy about to see all of this happening, as disgusting as it is, I think that we should embrace and take initiative of the fact that people are showing their hands with all of this, and we kind of get a feel for where it's stemming from. But people are showing their hands, people are showing their cards, and before anyone does these things and feel these ways behind the backs of me, if I'm representing this organization, I in this franchise, I'm glad that they're showing exactly who they are as a person before I'm blindsided and not really sure as to exactly what it is that they're all about.
Neisha, you played in the league. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's really disheartening when an owner says something like that. But first of all, her ethics is being called into questions on several issues, not just race, right? She's under fire and under investigation as we speak right now, after unloading a bunch of stocks prior to the coronavirus hitting. So we're talking about a potential alleged, thief already. And she's one of the wealthiest people in the Senate as we speak. And she had no political background or experience before being appointed by another robber who stole the Georgia election this year by Brian Kemp. So I think that a lot of WNBA players, and I spoke to a couple of them after this, given just giving her background, you take it at 2 grains of salt, because we kind of already figured that she was like this, being that she was a Trump supporter and a Republican. But you would want owner to understand when the WNBA team that she represents and she co-owns is almost 80 to 90% Black, that you would have some empathy. But this, again, I definitely understand who she is, but I always go out to the leadership of our country. Right now, this is the first time in my lifetime that it's actually okay, you know what I mean, to say such horrendous things about gays, Blacks, poor people, disadvantaged people, people with physical, mental abilities. Like, this is the first time I've ever seen it. And it's given at the top from Trump. So, the girls, I can't come out to say how much the WNBA has stood up. They were the first team to band together way before wearing it in the locker room, speaking on it. The Black women in the league, actually, and more so in the WNBA, I've seen a lot of their white allies come together with them than I've seen in any other league. It's been really interesting to say. And as far as Kelly, I mean, being in Georgia, many people didn't understand how she got appointed seriously in the first place with no experience. And again, she showed her hands as she's being investigated right now with some potential fraud. So, I mean, it's one of those things.
Yeah, we got a lot of questions flowing out of Atlanta right now. Too many for this show right now. We could probably we could have a whole show on Atlanta,
right.
A whole series. You already got a series with the Housewives. We could have a whole over there coming out of Atlanta. But DeShaun, give me this here, man. When we talk to me about this, because you think about like the Los Angeles Clippers, right? You got the situation with Donald Sterling. The players actually stood up saying, listen, we're not going to take this, and forced Donald Sterling to actually give up his share of ownership of that team. How much power do athletes actually have in this fight towards racial justice?
Well, one thing I think that they have going for themselves is the fact that this is a players' league, not nearly as much as it is a coach's league. And when you have guys in position of power like LeBron James, who is not afraid to speak up and speak out on a lot of matters that maybe that's why some people had some of the issues with Michael Jordan and other players that they kind of had. But this is one that's not. And that's why they're consider him to be a leader, and just not on the floor, but off the floor as well, amongst some other guys as well. So when you start talking about the kind of effect that they have on all of this, I think it's great. I think it's phenomenal, putting them in position to where the target can be on their backs. They're embracing the pressure that can come along with this, the backlash that can come along with this. And the way that they're standing tall within there to be able to say, you know what, this is who we are, and we're not just going to take it from you. It's stemming over or overflowing now over into other sports. Like Neisha said, so much of it started in the WNBA. That caused it to go more into the NBA side. Now it's the NFL getting involved. When college football starts to play, there's going to be so many more athletes because there's so many more players that are on roster spots on a team that's going to be, showing some influence as well. And so I think overall the power that they hold in general, especially on that NBA level, and doing it right here within the playoffs, all eyes are on that. I'm just hoping that, it overflows into football, which is going to be the next thing that everybody's going to be paying attention to, because it's America's sport.
Look, it flowed into tennis. Naomi Osaka.
Yep.
I mean, she walked off, right? And then she ends up winning the Open. Like, what would have happened if they went on without her? Like, she wouldn't have had the opportunity to win, but she was willing to put her championship on the line to say, listen. And every day that she came out with a face mask, every day, she had a name. Whether it was Aubrey, whether it was Breonna Taylor. I mean, this is really flowing across American sports where you have to pay attention and you have to do, the day of being silent. Silence is complicity, I think, right now. And we all understand that. But unfortunately, you still have some people who aren't going to raise their voice. I'm going to take a quick break because I got to, but I want to get to this question because I talked about in the last segment, which is when we talk about the NBA, I want to talk about coaches and owners, right? Because there is this, we talk about racism. How about racism within the sport itself when it's about hiring and the ability to hire people? So let me take a quick break, come back with both of them. You're watching Perspectives. We'll be back in just a second, right after this. Back here on Perspectives, continue our conversation, talking about racism in sports. Particularly, we've been talking about the NBA. Neisha, I want to bring you in as we talk about this here. Head coaches. We saw a lot of controversy with the Steve Nash hire. We know Stephen A. Really went front and center talking about African-American coaches don't get the opportunities the same way like a Steve Nash got it. But when we really look, a lot of these guys get the opportunities, but they're for building up a team, but they're never bought into certain scenarios where you have the opportunity to possibly win a championship. But talk to us about the head coaching debacle and the racism that's there right within the coaching industry.
Well, the first thing, I mean, nepotism is alive, right? I mean, the reason why Black coaches are not getting picked is because they're simply are not in the leadership positions to pick them. And I really want to make a point to say that athletes, just like people, have exact amount of power that they think they have. Because, LeBron James is no different than Michael Jordan, but he's very different in Michael Jordan in civil rights, right? Like Muhammad Ali, if you talk about the Cleveland Summit in 1967, the number one thing of power is forget economics and sitting out a game, is sitting out a war and losing years of your life, of your best peak age. So I think, and athletes came, Jim Brown, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, people came and in support of him, and that really solidified the actual power we have. But there are people like Michael Jordan or simply like OJ who feel like they are just OJ, as the Jay-Z song. So I think that the importance of picking Black coaches, it really has to do with people being in power, whether it's the athletes finishing school, getting the MBA degrees paid for, and vying after these positions. But I also see that, just like kids can dream to become something that they don't see, I think athletes don't even go after those jobs. A lot of athletes don't even think that they have to, have the MBA before they have a leadership position, or, what I mean? Or some of them, just like Doc Rivers has like 4 head coaches on his bench, or Pop, has a couple of head coaches on his bench. So I think it's time, but I think the NBA is different from the NFL when you have the head of the league of the NBA being of Jewish descent. And I think that is the reason why you have Black Lives Matters on a basketball court and not a football field, is because of the leadership position and what they represent. When you have a Jewish man who understands full well about the Holocaust and understands full well when Jewish people weren't allowed to be in the movies and had to change their noses, had to change their last names, and to do so many things to yield the power and to have nepotism to pick people, and they realized that they weren't going to get anything. They had to take it, and they had to pull along people with them. And I think Black people are getting the message now. I think more and more, we're dictating with our spending power. We're buying more Black things. We're not going to games if there's not, talking about Black issues. I think economically, before, I think my dad told me that people only respect loss of money or loss of life. That's it.
That's it.
That's right. It. You know what I mean? And this is nothing like controversy. This is human. I'm a human being, and my Black brothers and my Black fathers and my Black uncles is just as important as, my white friends, uncles, and fathers. And until we affect change on an economic level or a loss of life level, which I think Black Americans are now getting prepared to do both. I think that's really the only significant change, because we realize in this country, given our history, this country was built on thieves. They were called, thieves from England, right? They were called outlaws and stuff from England. So this country wasn't built on, hey, excuse me, sir, do you realize that you're killing us? Do you realize you have your neck on our back? Can you please give us a head coaching job? No, it's when star players say, I don't want to play for this guy. So I want to demand a trade, because I need a black coach to understand me. That's why more black kids are going to historical black colleges now, because they're realizing they need that.
DeShaun, let me get you in here real quickly and talk about this whole issue of voting, right? Because there is the power of these guys are actually trying to steer people to vote.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say that, when we were in position to, as black people, where we really wanted to see Barack Obama become the first black president of the United States of America, I felt like we went after that hard. I'm trying to figure out exactly where that separates in terms of importance between voting to make him the first black African-American president and voting to get Donald Trump out, if that's what you decide to do, or putting on the pressure of that. And even when you talk about in the music industry, the presence that guys like, just for an example, Young Jeezy had with his Vote or Die movement and My President's Black songs and all of these things, those are things that really pushed in the African-American community to go out there and make those decisions and do those things. Now it kind of seems like a lot of that pressure is being put on some of the athletes to push people to go out there and do that. I just think one way that could do it, and I can't tell you all the different incentives and so forth that some of these players could do, but the same way that you hear on your local radio stations consistently, hey, come on out here to this chicken wing spot between 3 and 5. We got this DJ out here. We got this person. Hey, LeBron James or whomever James is out here doing autograph signings, for the sake of, social distancing or whatever. One thing people will do, people will get up and they will move their feet if there's something that's beneficial in there to them. And hey, come over here. You'll get your autograph poster by LeBron or whatever. Come show that you're voted with your sticker today or whatever. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Not saying he should be the only person, because we got to look at ourselves in the mirror in terms of what is DeShaun Tate doing for his community to go out there instead of pointing the finger and saying, what is LeBron James, Magic Johnson, and everybody else doing? So I definitely want to make sure that I mention that. And as far as when you were talking about the coaches, Nate McMillan, the head coach of the Indiana Pacers, lost to the number 5 seeded Miami Heat this year, and he got axed after he got swept. Well, guess what? Him being a black coach, he's no longer the coach there. Now you have a situation where the number 1 seeded Milwaukee Bucks, led by Mike Budenholzer, a white coach, only wins 1 game in that series, regardless of injuries or whatever, what have you. And there's no even conversation about him not getting axed from that job. Right. And you talk about the Steve Nash situation. I apologize for getting a little long-winded, but I'm passionate. No. You have a situation like a Steve Nash. I think it's not necessarily the fact that Steve Nash got the job or got the crack at the job. I think the main thing is the fact that with the optics, the way that it looks, when you have all these other head coaches that have experience, that have been successful, Mark Jackson that put together initially, not Steve Kerr, Mark Jackson that put that Golden State Warriors team together, nobody's even heard about him getting an opportunity ever again. And I don't know what that's going to take. And so I think just with the optics is exactly how they went about doing it, keeping it as a secret, hiring within for Steve Nash is exactly probably why it looks so bad.
Yeah, we're going to have to leave it there. But guys, I want to thank you guys for sharing with us. Listen, this is an important conversation. So I need you to come back so we can do it again and we can hit the issues again. And we can really go, because listen, this is more than just like the 30 minutes I can give you right here. It's really, a series, to be honest with you, talk about the variety of different issues. But thank you so much, Neisha, DeShaun. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
All right, listen, that about wraps it up here for us on Perspectives. I am Daren Jaime saying thank you guys for watching. Until the next time we meet, stay safe. Share your perspective with somebody else you just don't know. It might make a difference in somebody else's life. Take care.